Welcome back to the sewing room. I'm Laura, and today I'm trying to make myself finish this blouse, shirt, tunic thing I've been working on for a long time with the help of a sewing machine that I keep specifically for making buttonholes. So let's get into it. Okay, so almost a year ago I took up swimming again, and I absolutely love it. I'm having a blast, but the slight problem it has introduced into my life is I have that much less time to sew. I used to take about at least 30 minutes and up to an hour and a half every morning before work to sew, and now that time is spent, swimming or, getting ready for work after swimming, and so I just don't have time to do that anymore. So I'm really kind of stuck with just what I can get away with either at night and on the weekends. And at first I was like, oh, I swear I'm just gonna really commit to that time for myself and get it done, and I just haven't been. So the drawback is it means it takes me just a really long time to make anything. But of course, the nice thing about clothes is once you have made them, hopefully you get to use them for a long time. So I still get to wear a lot of the clothes that I absolutely love that I've already made. But the thing I've been kind of stuck on for a while actually is this cute little blouse. I bought the pattern at the Textile Center Garage Sale in April. It is now June. It's actually quite late in June, and I'm not quite finished with it yet. It's really close. Basically, I just have a little hand sewing to do here, and I need to make the buttonholes and put on the buttons, and that's it. So I'm partly filming this to force myself to actually do it, and also talk to you a little bit about what it's like to test buttonholes. I'm all ready to do that when I'm ready to do that. And also hand sewing for someone like me who's not a very confident hand sewer. And unfortunately it is black on black on black, so it's going to be a little hard to see, but I'm hoping that you'll still get something out of it. So let's see what happens. And now the first thing that does help me help stay a little bit more motivated, or moving forward at least, when I do have hand sewing to do, is I do have basically like a little task box with my hand sewing stuff in it, so that say we are watching TV in the evening and I realize, oh, I want to hand sew that, then I can. And it's just very, very simple. Basically I have a little mess of needles in here, which is messier than I probably need it to be. I have some thread. Sometimes I use the whole spool, but a lot of times I do have just half a bobbin wound, and I just use my half a bobbin for that. Gotta have a thimble and some scissors. And the nice thing about having them together in a box is I don't know how many of you have pets, but my cats in particular are actually the reason that my sewing space is in the basement. When Victor, our currently oldest cat, only by a month, was a baby, I tried sewing upstairs, and I thought I was being so careful and good about picking up after myself, and then about an hour after I had put everything away, I caught him playing with a sharp stick pin. Clearly had come from my sewing. Somehow I had dropped it and not noticed, and so I was like, okay, that's it, I'm moving to the basement. So having a little box like this, and again, just a really simple box, it's nothing fancy, does help make me a little bit more portable, although I have been using the black on black on black as an excuse not to do it in the evening while watching TV. But anyway, if that kind of thing helps keep you organized and helps you in your sewing life, please feel free to copy my idea. All right, the big tip from Lisa, who is a very good hand sewer, is that a lot of us kind of think of threading a needle as like you hold the needle and then you push the thread in. So and I think a lot of that comes from using sewing machines. That's kind of what you have to do to an extent if you're not using a needle threader. But when you're hand sewing, it's actually much better to think of it as needling the thread versus threading the needle. So I've got my thread here, and I've got my needle, and I can see the eye of the needle if I look close. And then basically I'm holding the thread still, and I'm pushing, and my thread is splitting, so that's annoying. I'm pushing the needle onto the thread, and that does actually work super well. Works way better than whatever I was doing before Lisa told me that. Alright, tip number 1 is the box. Tip number 2 is threading the needle without, you know, driving yourself crazy and a mess. Number 3 is tying the knot on the end of your thread. Now there's a bunch of ways to do this, and if you're being let's say clean, or you're working around other people, or you know, maybe your hands aren't as clean as you'd like, don't do it this way. Do it with a glass of water. But you know, I mean, well, okay, I'll do it the right way. I'm not even like dolled up today, and sometimes I would take that as a reason not to film. But you know, the reality of life is you don't always have time to do everything, including get dolled up. So okay, so I've got a little dish, a little water here, and I've got my needle, and I'm just going to wet my finger. I almost licked it. Wet my finger with water. Now licking your finger or sticking your finger in your mouth will also work, but in defense of cleanliness, okay, don't do it. But also, using actually dipping your finger in water gets your finger a lot more wet. So it makes this process work a lot better. And I'm just realizing I just did that where you couldn't see what I was doing. So I'm going to try that again. So once your finger is wet, what you do is you take the end of the thread like this, you just pinch it, you wrap it around your finger once, like that, and then you just take your thumb and you roll that little bit of thread off of your finger. And what that does is that creates a little knot that then you can just pull down, and there's your knot. Now, if your knot is like mine and it looks a little bit messy, you can sometimes see there's like kind of the main knot and then there's just extra thread behind it. If that bothers you, you can always just trim that off. And the knot will still, you know, be a knot. So if you look at this construction, it's actually pretty ingenious. You stitch the cuff onto the outside of the sleeve, and then you do this and turn your corner, and then flip it over. And now there's just a little hand sewing to attach the inside of the cuff. And what's nice about that is if your hand sewing isn't absolutely gorgeous, it doesn't matter. It's the inside of the cuff. And I'm right-handed, so I like to work from, for this case, from the right to the left. So I'm just going to kind of sink this knot with a little stitch in this corner. And what's nice about this kind of sewing is you're not trying to imitate a machine. You don't have to put in 10 stitches to the inch. It's actually, you want to make actually pretty big stitches for this kind of hemming, about 1/2 inch or more. But all I'm doing is I'm just sinking the needle in right in the folded edge of this cuff, bringing that through. And then I have to just take the world's tiniest, not the world's tiniest, but the smallest stitch I can make into the layer below. And you can see the machine stitching from the outside. So if you want to, you can kind of aim to grab basically around one of the machine stitches and use that as kind of your visual clue to grab just a very, very small stitch. And once you've grabbed that small stitch in that location, then you go back to the cuff side, and again, you're building about 1/2 inch. Or for those of you who are metric, it's like 10 centimeters, 10 or 12 centimeters. So pretty big stitches. So this actually doesn't even take that long. So it's always a mystery to me how it's so easy to procrastinate the last like 10% of the project. When you're practically done, you can see, you can practically taste it, and you're still, sometimes it's just hard to finish. And the goal here is to pull it just tightly enough so that it holds, but these two lines are the same length, so you're not trying to ease in anything here. And one of the big things that really surprised me about when watching Lisa hand sew was that she'll often treat her hand sewing just the same as I would treat my machine sewing, which means that, say, like if you were going to pin this edge down before you sewed it to machine sew it, she would also pin it down to hand sew it. And here I was thinking that everything with hand sewing had to just be completely freehand, and it's just not. It can be, you can do as many control tactics. So if you would baste here and you want to baste here before you do the final stitching, fine. If you pin in order to feel secure about your positioning, that's great. This fabric is pretty stable, so I'm not super worried about it moving around on me. You can see I'm kind of holding, like my finger here is kind of acting like a pin. But whatever you need to do to feel secure about the positioning of your stitching, whatever method you use for machine stitching can also work just fine for hand stitching. If you're ever nervous that the stitches you're putting in might show to the outside when you don't want them to, you can put the needle in where you think you want it to go and then just flip the piece over and just double check. And in this case I can't see the needle, which means I won't be able to see the stitch, so that's what I want. Every once in a while your thread is going to tangle. Lisa's more disciplined than I am, and she adds wax and sometimes even like irons her thread with an iron to keep that from happening, or at least to reduce it happening. I don't. I just kind of, if I start to see it tingle, I just take a minute to pull it out, and so far that's been working pretty well for me. But I'm also not doing like whole gowns in hand stitching, so maybe I can afford to be a little more laissez-faire about it. Now for me, I do sometimes kind of agonize about what to do right at the end here, right? So there's just this little kind of cornerish area, and you can really drive yourself a little nuts trying to make it perfectly neat. For me, the main thing I've noticed is I just don't want it to fray. So sometimes I've been using a slip stitch up to now, so sometimes I will kind of switch to a little bit of, I'm not even sure if it's called overcast or what, but basically I'm just gonna whip stitch. I think it's whip stitch. Just teeny tiny little whip stitches here, just to close this area up and make sure nothing frays or pops out. Because after all, that's what you're gonna see, more than just one little black on black on black thread going around. So I'm just kind of pinching that all together. And ending off, what I like to do is kind of work backwards a little bit. And I just take one teeny tiny stitch and then bring that through the loop from the stitch. Pull that so it basically makes a little knot, and I do that twice. And if you want to, you could add a little dab of fray check over that knot, but I've been doing it this way for a while and I haven't had any problems. And if you're like me and you're a little paranoid about snipping into your work, one way you can kind of reduce the risk of that is instead of closing the scissors on your thread, you can keep the scissors at, you know, a slightly open and just push them onto the thread to cut the thread. That way you really don't run the risk of accidentally snipping into your project. Now here's one of my, I think, well-known defenses for having multiple sewing machines, which is that means I can leave a machine permanently set up with a buttonhole or attachment. That doesn't mean I never have to take off the attachment, and in fact today is one of the times that I do, because changing the bobbin with this attachment on can be kind of challenging, and it's often easier to just, you know, take it off and, you know, change the bobbin that way. So in this case, the thread underneath in the bobbin area right now is this kind of maroon color. And while I haven't cared for a little bit, if I had a perfect match, I feel like for this, since this blouse is black on black on black on black, I do want to change the bobbin out, so I'm just going to do that real quickly. Now this is a vertical needle machine, so a lot of different machines can use this particular buttonhole attachment. I have several buttonholers, so this is the one that I do use the most. I do feel like the vertical needle position does give you slightly more kind of punching power, as it were, so that's part of why I keep this machine that way. Really, so funny. Get a screwdriver. I realize this looks a little funny because I have a cone here for this thread instead of just your standard spool, but it's going to work the same way. So instead of putting a spool here, I'm going to put the cone over here. Thread through the tension disc here. Thread through the bobbin here. Okay, easier said than done sometimes. Get in there. Make sure this isn't hitting anything else. That all looks good. Down. I'm going to try to disengage this. Sometimes this is a little stuck, so I may have to deal with that. Okay, so that was a mistake. I should have unthreaded this needle first, but now I have to take all this apart to make sure that I don't create a bobbin jam. Oh, that's the needle. Oh my god, panicking. I'll have to take the needle out. I do want to take this off. There we go. You see that's a potential issue, so I want to avoid letting that be a bigger issue. Oh goodness. Look at you. You're a mess. Now that I've taken all that apart, that just lifts easily out, which is nice. Although it's actually probably not a bad thing that I had to do that, because I can see this area has a lot of lint in it, so I'm going to clean that before I do anything else. 1 second. Oops. Now that maybe doesn't look like a lot of lint or big deal, but any lint is bad lint, especially when you're trying to use a machine for buttonholes. You want it to be... Okay, so the clutch did work, which is good. I'm just taking a peek at the rest of the bobbin area before I move forward. Why not? Looks good. On today's episode of Stuff Laura is learning in free time, in real time, right in front of everybody, that was not the right position for this. So I think this needs to go behind, because what was happening was I wasn't getting enough. This just wasn't working. Now this particular machine, this is a 328K, and the light does not turn off while the machine is plugged in, and the machine doesn't turn off while the machine is plugged in. I'm told this was a cost-saving measure, and that this is not the like highest end Singer that was available at the time. I think it was kind of the budget model, but it still works. Great little machine. All right, let's see. There we go. That's better. Now, as with all plastic bobbins, I am always very cautious not to fill it all the way, because I have done that. And when you fill it, if you overfill it, sometimes the whole bobbin will just break apart. The pressure is just too much. So don't do that. Always stop when there's still a little bit of room left on the bobbin. All right, I'm going to re-engage the clutch. And I haven't fully decided, so I do sometimes make buttonholes out of just all-purpose thread, the same thread that I use to sew the garment. For some buttons and some larger, especially larger buttonholes, I will sometimes use a thicker thread. But I am going to test what happens with this machine and this size buttonhole if I do it with just the all-purpose, because, you know, why not? This is one of the machines where the thread for the bobbin goes in with the tail going off on the left. Some people call this the P position, P for perfect, Q for quit. That is true for this machine. So you do want to load it in that direction. And then don't forget to actually thread the bobbin as well. Once this buttonholer is on, it is kind of hard to adjust anything in the bobbin area, so you do want to try to get it right the first time. This plate goes over, and you do want to be very careful to make sure that it's actually lined up, so it will break your needle. Okay, it's lined up. I just wish there was a better. I need either something shorter or longer. That's as good as that gets, I think. Okay. In this case, there are 3 different kinds of buttonholes this machine, this attachment can make. I want a green one, which is just a plain buttonhole. There's also one where there's an open end like that, and then the third style looks like that. So I just want the plain green one, and the buttons are about 1/2 inch, which is again about 12 centimeters. Or, God, that'd be huge, 12 millimeters. So I'm hoping that I have a buttonhole the right size. And 13 millimeter, which is 12, 1/2 inch. So I guess it's actually 12.5 millimeters for 1/2 inch, but you know what I meant. So the template goes in that position, and you want to push it down until it clicks. And then this is a little funny. There's this little metal thing that has to come out to kind of help push everything down or hold it down. So you want to make sure that's locked. And then to check that it's actually locked in the proper position, you can manually move this and watch that this is moving once for every time you're clicking it. And then this is a little tricky, but basically this goes where your foot would normally attach, or the sewing machine foot would normally attach, and this has to go over the needle bar. So it can sometimes take a little fidgeting. I think I just came at it from the wrong side. There we go. Ah! Alright, that actually went pretty well. Alright. There we go. And I don't always use a screwdriver for every foot, but there's a lot going on with the buttonhole, so I do like to take a screwdriver once I have it on and just tighten that up a little bit. And if you're lucky, this often has slightly more heavy duty screw to hold it onto the machine. So hopefully, if you buy one of these used, hopefully that hasn't been lost. Because I do think it does make a difference in how stable the attachment is. Frankly, there's enough things that can go wrong with buttonholes without the machine, without something actually flying off the machine. Alright, so that's all done. It's ready to thread. Which way is up? That way, okay. I'm going to raise the bobbin thread like normal. Now I'm ready to test. This is kind of a small piece for testing, but we'll see how it goes. But basically what you want to do is you do want to manually move things forward until it's as far forward as it goes, because then you'll be able to see these marks. So there's a mark down here and a mark up here, and that's your vertical line for your buttonhole. And then all these little marks on the side are other details. And so I'm going to line up my long line here with the two vertical ones, and then I'm going to hopefully be able to hit this chalked line up with the second set of notches from the top. So here's the first set, there's the second set, and hopefully I can do that easily, even though this piece is kind of small. And I'm gonna let the bottom thread kind of just go over it once, because I'm going to take care of that in the first stitch. Maybe sometimes have to kind of push things around a little bit. You can't always really see how well lined up things are until you actually lower the clamp, and then you can see if you want to adjust anything. In this case I do. It's pretty good. Okay, so with the buttonhole, first thing you do is you have just like kind of normal, as we've already raised the thread, but now we're going to also raise the bobbin thread so it's above the fabric. So I'm going to hang on to that thread and just with my hand just turn the wheel over once and gently pull until it comes up to the top. And I'll tell you, when a fabric is going to be tough to sew the buttonhole onto, this is often, that very first step is often, that's the first sign when things are going to go wrong, basically, because they'll just kind of choke. So that went really well. So hopefully that means things are going to go well. So sometimes I do like to take the first couple stitches just manually, and I just noticed I didn't quite have that closed. So I'm going to close that because you never know. And once I kind of feel confident that I have everything lined up correctly, and also after taking several stitches, and that can either be slow or fast, you do want to trim those two tails that are sticking up, because that's going to be, they would be very difficult to trim later, and it would leave a big, you know, piece of thread sticking out, which nobody wants. So let's just go. I could stop here. That's perfectly reasonable buttonhole. But I'm going to see what happens if I go over one more time. So that's why I'll often set up a slightly lower density buttonhole and stitch over it twice versus just doing one row of stitching. And maybe that's just because a lot of times I have had the machine skip one stitch, and that's very annoying. So, you know, this is kind of my little safeguard. Alright, so that's twice. So then I can just turn the wheel until, you can't see that because I've zoomed in too much. I turned, as usual, I took my hand wheel and I turned it until the take-up lever was at its highest point, and I'm sorry, repeating again. When I was done with the buttonhole, I turned the hand wheel toward me until the take-up lever was as high as it goes, and that means that now I'm ready to remove the work from the machine so I can lift the foot and pull the work out. And if I'm feeling a little like I want to save myself a little work later, I will often cut the top thread first, then the bottom thread, and then gently tug to see if I can just bring the top thread to the back right away. So from here, now all my thread's in the back. From here I can tie those two together in a knot. I can add a little fray check there. I can do both. But then that buttonhole is ready to really be finished. Now the reason this little piece was so tiny, normally I would do a larger piece for testing, is that this is actually the bottom of the button band of the shirt. I made the button band for the shirt way too long, not on purpose, but just because. And then when I cut it off, I realized, oh, I can use that to test the buttonhole. So it's literally the exact same configuration as the shirt, because it came off of that. But you're always testing more than one thing when you test for buttonholes, and for me, I'm testing how is this going to sew, what's it going to look like. I'm also testing, are my marks going to come off? Chalk is never 100% a sure thing, although I'm usually fairly confident. But fairly confident isn't entirely confident, so I'm just going to take another piece of the same fabric and just put that where you can see, hopefully, there we go, and just gently rub with the fabric to make sure those marks are really going to come out when it matters. That looks good. If it hadn't come out, what would I do? I could try a different marking method, and in absolute desperation, I would do basting to just thread mark it. But I do love my chalk, and that did come right out, which is really nice. The third thing that I'm checking when I make a buttonhole, besides is it going to work well and am I going to be able to remove my marks, is this really the correct size buttonhole for the button that I want to use? So I'm going to actually just cut this right open and check that. This is a buttonhole cutter set. It comes with like a little chisel. It's always a little frightening when the chisel is really exactly the size that you want, which is what this is exactly the same size. So I don't have any room for error here when I'm cutting open this buttonhole, but thankfully it's pretty straightforward. So you just line that up as well as you can. It is a chisel shape, so then you can just go vertical and then just press down. And there's my buttonhole. Looks pretty good. Actually, it looks like I do need to cut a little more on one side. There we go. These are the buttons I'm using. I know this seems really picky, but it would be so annoying to do this and add all these buttonholes and then discover that the buttons were the wrong size for the buttonhole, especially when I have so many more options for buttonhole sizes. But that is working perfectly, so I'm super happy with that. So now I'm ready to finally finish this blouse. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time, thank you for coming by. Either way, hope to see you soon.